Away for another Vaughan boundary.
Well, he's a great fieldsman, Philip Tufner. He often falls over and he's brought it into his batting as well.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Vaughany and Tuffers Cricket Club podcast brought to you by the Telegraph. Ben Wright, Michael Vaughan and Phil Tufnell with you as always. Test cricket is back, but unfortunately for England, they were brought back down to earth with a sobering defeat to South Africa at Lord's in the first of 3 tests between the two sides. Ben Stokes' men looked a bit more like the side that went down so meekly in the Ashes over the winter, rather than one that roared back to life under the new coach Brendon McCullum at the beginning of the summer. We'll unpack the opening test and ask where it went wrong for England. We're very lucky that we'll also be getting the verdict of former Proteas skipper Graeme Smith on the podcast. We'll get his take on a ruthless display of bowling from the South Africans and whether or not he thinks England can turn the series around from here. He's also going to talk to us about the new T20 Cricket League in South Africa, of which he is commissioner, and why he thinks Test cricket is doomed to only be contested by 5 or 6 teams in the near future. We'll also be talking about Ben Stokes. His documentary Phoenix from the Ashes is out later this week, and we'll be getting the latest on the 100 from Phil too. All right, morning chaps. How are you? It's Michael who is on his travels now. He's out of the country. Where are you, Mike?
I'm in Portugal. I got a bit of sunstroke yesterday, guys, I'm afraid. It might have coincided with an odd oyster or two. So you imagine my evening's been a little bit, to and froing from the bathroom, I'm afraid.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I'm battling a bit. But, I'll get through it. The sun's shining. I'll be back out there today.
Mike, when you're on holiday, what sort of hat do you wear?
Well, I think that's the issue yesterday, Phil. I played paddle tennis in the morning with no hat on. Oh. And then I went for some nice bit of sea bass and a glass of rosé or two, went on the beach. And the sea down here in Portugal, I'm sure you've been, it's very, very cold.
Yeah.
Very cold. So once you're in, you've got to stay in because you don't want to get out to get back in. And the problem is, I think the sun was beating down on my head. So, yeah, I got a bit of the stroke. And then I watched Man United last night and had a couple more. And as you do, it's just one after another. And eventually you wake up at 4 a.m, you kind of go, ooh, there's something not quite right here.
No.
Ooh, and then it was just like the bleep test. It was like the bleep test from the bathroom to the bed. Beep.
And the beeps were getting closer together.
Well, it was getting quick. Beep, beep, beep. Yeah, it was getting far too quick. But I think I've got these tablets I'm taking, hydration tablets, and I think they're doing a decent job. They're getting me back on track.
Sounds like you're getting more runs than the England test team.
Yeah, that was very good, Ben. But I have to say, the bump in the road came, didn't it? And it was an almighty bump. And there'll be another one. It might be at Old Trafford with the style that England are trying to play. I'm not going to criticise them too much because I actually love watching them play. They're stupid at times and they play a brand that's going to get them into that position of being blown away by quality teams, particularly quality bowling lineups like South Africa have. But I have to say, you can't stop watching England. You can't because they're entertaining. They're trying to do something. And I always talk about Ben Stokes as a captain that I just hope in time he's not just a one-trick pony. I just hope that he understands that you can't just play that way all the time. You've got to earn the right to play that aggressive style against quality bowling, particularly pace. When you've got the pace of Nortje, Rabada, Janssen left arm, great variation. You've got a wily spinner in Maharaj. You can't just go for the attacking option all the time. So I'm hoping, and it wasn't just with the bat, I thought with the field settings, Phil, and you were there on that second day when the field was set so aggressively that it allowed South Africa, particularly in that last hour and a half in day 2, to score so quickly. They ended up with a lead of 120 after day 2. It should have been a lead of around 80, I reckon. 80 by the closing day 2, but he had so many gaps. South Africa scored freely. So I think it was a 3 days where Ben, if he's, really wanting to be an outstanding captain, he's an entertaining captain, he's done brilliantly so far, but if he wants to be an outstanding captain, he's just got to play the game a little bit more in terms of, yes, be aggressive when you can, but sometimes just sit in and played the longer game.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. The new ball was something like 3 overs away, wasn't it, on the next morning? And so you had that opportunity just to sit in. Listen, you can still keep 2 slips and a gully in that situation. It was coming towards the end of the day. Sit in, have the extra, have the deep square leg, perhaps have a deep cover. And you say the lead would have been 50 or 60 light. But I was impressed with that South African bowling lineup. They look like a team who have come over here and want to put the flag in the ground. That Norkia bowled the speed and light. You had the beautiful shape and swing of Rabada. I mean, you forgot Ngidi there, who I thought bowled beautifully as well, Mike, as well. Was a little bit unlucky not to get the run. So it is going to be difficult. I think England have got to try and get those seam bowlers and fast bowlers into their second and third spells somehow, because they were just fresh as a daisy every time a new batsman was coming in, and we didn't get any sort of overs into their legs. They were just steaming in at us, and they blew us away, to be fair. We didn't seem to have a plan about how to just overcome them and then start looking to go through the gears. It was like, let's go through the gears from ball one, and you can't do that at 95 miles an hour when it's swinging around corners.
No, and I think the plan for England now is if they're asked to bat first at Old Trafford, they have to play differently.
Yeah.
You know, chasing the game against New Zealand, against India, remarkable what they achieved. And on many of those games, they were behind the game. You know, Trent Bridge, New Zealand got 500, England won that game. Chasing down over 300 at Headingley. Being behind the game against India in that first innings to go on and win that game was remarkable. But batting first, and generally in England, when you bat first, it does a little bit more in the first session because there's a bit of moisture in the surface. So if you come out playing all the shots like England did on that first morning at Lord's, where it was a good toss to win, there was a lot of kind of mugginess around the ground, and it was going to win. But that is what I'm saying about Ben's team. They've got to realise that and just try and get to lunch 2 down. You're always going to lose a wicket or 2 in those conditions, but don't lose 5 or 6 playing big shots and thinking that you have to score at 4 and 5s all the time. Now, I looked at that Alex Lee shot as an opening batter on the opening morning of a test match at Lord's. That was a really poor shot. A length ball trying to punch it. That's a really, really poor shot for an opening batter. And that puts pressure on the middle order then when you lose 2 early wickets. That opening partnership is an issue.
Yeah, Zach Crawley, what's to be done there? I mean, it seems like the England management have backed him so much now that he's almost undroppable. But something's got to give at some point.
I just think sometimes you're almost crueler by playing him.
Mm.
You know, I think he's a young player that has talent. I don't think he has a method of scoring quite right in his own mind to understand what he's about in terms of how he's going to score, you know, against the new ball when he gets in. Where's his scoring zones? I'm not too sure where he understands that quite yet. But he's young enough, in my opinion, to be taken out of the firing line, to go away and work and then come back again. You know, I just feel if you carry on playing him and it goes worse and worse and worse, it might be harder for him to come back again.
Yeah.
Who's to replace him? That's always the question. It's all right saying get rid of someone. Who's to replace him? It would be square pegs in round holes, but Harry Book is playing incredibly.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that he would do any worse. So that'd be my way to go. Alex Lees needs to improve. He played okay in the second innings, but I just think he's getting himself confused slightly with this method that England are trying to play, that he's trying to be this aggressive. He's trying to be Matthew Hayden. And I'll give you a clue, he's not. He's not Matthew Hayden. He's Alex Lees, who's been developed at Yorkshire, played nicely at Durham on stodgy kind of wickets that do a bit. He's a typical opening batter, in my opinion, that needs to give himself time to get in, and then he can go up in the gears once he's given himself time. He's not a player that's going to come out crashing it regular and be consistent.
Yeah.
So I would go Brook at the top of the order and just give that a go. He's not an opening batter. He's not batted in the top 3, but I just think they may as well try something different to what they're going with at the minute. Or they go with Zach Crawley and they wait for someone like Keaton Jennings, who's been playing nicely for Lancashire.
Yeah. Phil, what did you make of Brendon McCullum's comments about Crawley? Because he was saying that he doesn't have the style to be a consistent player. That's not what they're looking for from him. And that's caused some people to start scratching their heads because in some ways he has been consistent, just not in a good way. What did you make of that?
Well, I know what Brendan's trying to say there. What he's trying to say is that, through opening the batting is always going to be an inconsistent art form, so to speak, isn't it? You're probably going to get 1 out of 3 knocks where you get yourself in and have the opportunity to then go and score. So I don't think Brendan's necessarily worried about the times when he's going to fail. He just wants the time that when it is his time to go out and win England a test match. That's what he's trying to say, I think. And, but then you've got to get yourself in to go and do that. But I think that people have sort of like got on the wrong end of the stick about that. It's all about inconsistency. Well, we're trying to get consistent and all that kind of thing. I think that Brendan's highlighted in Zach Crawley that he has the opportunity and the tools that he's got. He has the ability to then change games for England, and he doesn't want to take that one innings, let's say, out of 3 and 4 away from him. He wants to sort of like obviously work on sort of trying to get that consistency in his game, but make sure that gun performance that we have seen in him, is still there.
Talking of Ben Stokes, he's all over the front pages of the papers this morning. Not really about cricket or only tangentially. He's been giving interviews about his mental health, the death of his father, and even that incident outside the nightclub in Bristol for the first time. Ahead of the release of a documentary that's coming out on Amazon called Phoenix from the Ashes, which covers some of his darkest days. It's not out yet, but I think you've seen it, haven't you, Mike?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's typical Ben Stokes. Very revealing, very emotional. Particularly the footage of Ben with his father. Very exciting as well. The Henley moment relived is just incredible. The World Cup final. He alludes to calling someone in a suit or someone in a suit from the ECB wanting a selfie after the 2019 World Cup. I think he tells him to F off.
Tells him to F off because he didn't like how he was treated by some of the suits in the ECB following the incident in Bristol, right?
I particularly think it's the person that he tells to F off. I don't think that person, Ben, felt treated him quite fairly throughout that process. So look, it's Ben Stokes, his box office. It's well worth a watch. It really is. It's and it's great for cricket because you do get into the emotions of how hard it is. Yeah. He's an incredible performer, but how hard it is to win a World Cup, how hard it is to obviously playing innings like he did at Henley, how hard it is to deal with off-field difficulties. He's had more than most. And obviously his mental well-being and mental health situation, which is well documented, is very, very honest about it. So it's well worth a watch.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but I've been reading the interviews in the papers this morning, one in the Telegraph by Jeremy Wilson. And he's talking about watching it back himself. And I think it includes 2 interviews conducted by Sir Sam Mendes, who's the Oscar-winning film director, also a massive cricket fan. And one of those was conducted just 2 weeks after he announced his indefinite departure from cricket in July 2021, when he was, at his own admission, at his lowest ebb. And he says he's watching it back and it's like there's nothing behind his eyes. He's a sort of husk of a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's... to do a movie like this is, and also to do it so young, really. He's got so many years ahead of him in terms of what he could achieve as a Test match captain, giving up the 50-over game, but there's the T20 World Cups. There's so much more for Ben to do in his life that I wouldn't be surprised if there's another one.
Yeah.
I think there might be a part 2.
Rocky 5. Those things can be very sort of cathartic, if that's the right word, to do those kind of things. You can grow from them a lot. I can remember when I did a couple of my books, I really did enjoy just spending that time, as you say, sort of turning yourself around and looking back at yourself. You can get a lot from them and grow from a lot. So in a way, people think, oh, you're revealing so much about you. It can sort of, it can weaken you. And, you shouldn't be telling all these people about all your sort of inner secrets and dark days and things. Sometimes it can be very uplifting and it takes that weight off your shoulders. So I expect it to be a good thing, not only for us all to watch because it's going to be very interesting, but also for Ben as well. I think it could be sort of like shedding your skin a bit.
We are joined today in the gap between the Test at Lords and Old Trafford by South Africa's greatest ever captain, Graeme Smith. Graeme, thanks for joining us. First things first, what did you make of South Africa's win at Lords? It was pretty emphatic. Were you expecting that? And you're obviously a keen observer of South African cricket. How good is this team, and especially the four-pronged pace attack?
Hey, Ben. Firstly, thanks for having me. Always good to join this esteemed crowd. From my perspective, I mean, obviously it was a fantastic few days at Lords. It was great to be back there. I mean, not being able to get back to the UK with COVID and everything else, it was almost surreal to be back in the UK enjoying cricket. Yeah, I mean, going into the series, I honestly thought it would be the two bowling attacks, and you know, who could scrap a decent total at some point. You know, I think both batting lineups have their problems. I think South Africa scrapped really well to get to a total, which ultimately was the difference. But yeah, I think that full pace attack is something that is very exciting. I don't know what the wicket looks like in Manchester. I know they're very keen to go two spinners as well with Harmer in the lineup. So I think the approach is to always be aggressive with the ball from a South African perspective. You know, they're not looking to cover their bases with that extra batter. But I think it's just such a nice all-round attack, isn't it? I mean, when you've got, I think Maharaj is solid. You know what you're going to get from him. You got a left armer, tall, swings it. You got the pace of Nortje, Rabada. I don't know how. I think Rabada's still under 25. I could be wrong, but I mean that attack is young. It can grow, you know, into the future as well.
Big Bird, as I call you. I've never really asked you this, but before I ask you about the Test match at Lords, do you take great pleasure in seeing off England Test captains? Do you sit back and think, you know what, I got rid of Nasser, I got rid of Vaughan, I got rid of Strauss. Nice big glass of red wine. See you, lads.
It's an unusual hat trick.
It's one of those things that other people like to celebrate more than me, I guess. You know, wherever I go, it's like an interesting topic. But listen, I can't say I was disappointed to see the back of Nas after, you know, he called me what's his name and introduced me as Greg at the toss, you know. I missed seeing Nas at Lords. I was waiting to get my pound of flesh in there, but he was hiding away. But no, you know, Vaughany, I think if I looked at the three, I think touring England is a massive thing in South African cricket. I started as a youngster, you know, I think, you know, our success away from home, probably from, you know, that 08 tour, 2012 as well, you know, in England and Australia was a huge moment in South African cricket. It's things that had never been achieved. So I think a lot of these things is also around timing. I would probably say I was most emotional about yours because we kind of started together, built together. I mean, you had the wood over me at a few times as well. So when you walked away, I think that was the one that probably affected me most. I guess with the Andrew Strauss one, there was so much happening on and off the field at the time that, you know, we were pushing hard to be number one in the world. And ultimately, you just get so driven by the moments that are in front of you, you know. So, yeah, I would say it probably is a balance. But listen, there's some good red wine here to think about. Light the fire.
Graeme, Tuffers here, mate. Nice to speak to you. What was that ride like getting to number one, and what do you sort of put it down to?
Tuffers, you know, I got given the captaincy at 22, so I think that first 4 years was a journey. You know, everywhere I went to, you kind of being taken on, you know, from media to public to the opposition teams that you're playing against. So you kind of, I think in the early days, I formed a real sort of barrier around myself. I think the strengths that I had was that, you know, behind the scenes, I had good support from the senior players. You know, I had a good connection with the people in the environment. But, you know, the only real skill I had on the field was determination, you know, and I think the one thing that kept me in the job in those earlier years was the fact that, you know, I scored runs. I managed to maintain scoring, you know, runs in those first 4 years. It was only really, you know, around, you know, 2006, 2007, I'd been in the job for 4 odd years. I was 26 that I really started to kind of, okay, now I've got to figure this out. I've got to start building a team that I'm proud of. And then I started, you know, really spent some time understanding that, trying to understand the job. And that's when we started to build that team with Steyn, Morkel, Philander eventually came in, you know, the Yamlas, the De Villiers, They were the youngsters coming through. We started to move away from a cricket perspective. South African cricket had a lot of all-rounders at that period. If you think about the early journeys, a lot of batting deep, a lot of all-rounders. We then started to focus on more specialists in that period. So bowlers to take wickets. We found a consistent option with the spin with Paul Harris. And we really started to build a team and a batting unit. And that ultimately then became the success that we built on. And I think obviously my experience and growth from that period also played a big role.
And Smithy, you mentioned building a team. Ben Stokes is at the start of building a team, building a culture, an ethos around how he wants his team to play. So far, he pretty much got the Ferrari and put it in sixth gear, and that's the way he wants to play. Bazball, we don't like calling it Bazball, but it's kind of a terminology that's been used over the last few months about Brendon McCullum's team playing this aggressive nature. Is it sustainable, and what have you made of it?
Well, he looks to be 100% committed to it, which I guess is a start. But with these things, Vaughany, I think once you're in the job for a period of time, balance is always important. I think also understanding how to be successful in different environments is also a key factor. I don't think you can approach every game, every environment with the same approach. If you're touring Pakistan or India or Australia, even the different conditions you'll face around England, you need to mold your thing. Yes, your mindset can be that we're going to look to be positive, we're going to look to be taking the game on. But it's impossible to play that way sometimes. You've got to adapt. You've got to be able to read the situation in front of you. And I remember having a chat to KG before this test, and he was asking me about mental strength. And often mental strength for me was knowing what needed to be done at the right time. How do I maximize my performance at the right time that can benefit the team? Do I read the play? Can I perform in that moment and get us to a position where we ultimately ahead of the game and an opportunity to win the game? So, for me, I think there's got to be more to it. Maybe there is more depth behind the scenes, in the way that they talk, in the way that they analyze. But I think, those are important factors. And as Ben grows in the job, he's going to realize that. You learn, you bump your head, you make the mistakes, you do things well, and then you kind of mold your approach, I think, as you go along. I mean, I'm sure you experienced the same.
Graeme, you were captain for 108 tests for South Africa. What do you see as the art and captaincy? What do you put down your success to?
Sure. I think to go that long, you need a form of maybe stupidity, but resilience and an ability to handle pressure, I think is massive. I think how you process pressure is important as well, because I'm sure, Tuffers and Vaughany, there were moments when you wake up in the morning that you don't really want to get out of bed. I mean, I remember that 150 at Edgbaston, and Vaughany, I actually, the day before was a really tough day for us. We were ahead of the game. We let it slip. You guys got to a position. And I remember that morning struggling to get out of bed. You feel the pressure, your body's sore, your mind's sore, but then you find a way to kind of, get into the contest and compete. So I think those days are there. You've got to be able to overcome them and to deal with them. But I think, once you've built the squad, you feel in control, and you're still motivated, then I think it's a lot easier to do. I think it's when you start to reach that point. And I think that happened to me at the end of my career. We were on top of the world. Gary Kirsten was our coach. We had a great team. I was in control. A lot of the things were being managed around me as well. So, and I was really enjoying it. Then Gary stepped away. Then suddenly Callis retired, and then a new younger coach came in, and I just realized I don't have the energy or the ability to go 5 steps back and do this all again. So, when you've invested so much time and effort in building that environment to what it is, and now you've got to go back to do it again, I just didn't have that in me. So that's in the end why I walked away.
Do you think leaders are born or made? Because it's obviously you were made captain at 22. It seemed like, you probably wouldn't say you were fully formed at that stage and that you developed through your captaincy, but you obviously had the leadership ability almost fairly innately.
I do think how many books have been written on leadership? I do think it's a skill. You do inherit large parts of it. It doesn't mean that you're you can't grow. I mean, ultimately, every environment you're in, there's different aspects that you need to develop as a leader. So you can be a great leader in this one thing, but you move into a new environment and you've got to develop. But the certain fundamental skills, I think, are important. So when I look at myself I think I certainly was born with I craved leadership. I craved to be at the forefront. I wanted to be leading the environment, and I think that's important. You cannot. I don't think in the sport world in particular, when you've got so much pressure on you, you can be a reluctant leader, and that's what it's going to be interesting to watch with Ben, with his body, with his sort of mental health stuff that he's had going on, with the pressure of captaining England. How long can he cope with that, especially if things don't always go well? That's going to be how he regroups and recovers from that is going to be key.
Yeah, you talk about wanting to be a leader. I remember when you were first made captain of Touring England in 2003 at the age of 22, reading an article saying that you had written a list of things you wanted to achieve as a kid and stuck it on your fridge. I remember being quite freaked out by that because I was 26 and I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Is there anything that you've still got on it that you haven't crossed off yet?
Nah, it wasn't just something that I sucked out of my thumb. It's just I was picked as a youngster. Like that kind of happened for me quite a lot. I was picked ahead of myself in age groups, and so I was exposed to a lot of older people, older cricketers all the time. And I was picked for this Plascon Academy. It's like a youngster academy. It used to be run by Conrad Hunt, the former West Indian in South Africa, and he brought in this psychologist. I'll never forget him, Dr. Andre Roux, and he was big on breathing and goal setting, and in there we had these sessions where he sat us down and taught us about goal setting, and we had to then write our goals. But ultimately, you put your own goals: short term, medium term, long term. So I actually had those goals down from there. So I was kind of taught about it, but ultimately set my own goals. Yeah.
Smithy, any reason why you put the list on the fridge?
Later in life, the fridge became a problem, but when I was young, it wasn't.
Yeah, Smithy, what do you recommend? What would you recommend to Ben, as you say? Because as a captain, you go through ups and downs, don't you? And you're going to have periods when things aren't going your way. What was your sort of way or path out of that? Did you have a sort of a routine for that?
So I had a routine of prepping myself, the team as well. But also then you've got to focus on your personal game. So you've got to learn to balance that I opened the batting as well. So, for example, I developed a routine in the changeover before I had to bat. So I knew that, my brain would almost transfer into batting mode instead of being in captaining mode. So I would, it wasn't superstition, it was just a routine. I would change my boots, I'd change my whole gear, I'd pad up a certain way. I'd have a routine that in that 10-minute changeover that my brain started to understand, okay, now it's batting time, we're going to leave captaincy. And it's the same kind of, when you're building to test matches or big games. I guess the key for Ben is right now, just from the outside, it looks like he's really focused and, stuck in a way, and this is how he wants to play. This is how he wants to take England forward. But over time, and he's got a good guy with him in Vaz, who's very balanced and, has, a really good way of handling people, but for him, he's got to find that outlet for himself, someone that he trusts, someone that he can communicate with, because often as a leader, you find yourself in that lonely position where, you've got so much in your head and you need to process it and you don't know if it's right or wrong. So, just having someone that he has that outlet with, that he can debate things with or chat to and take that and take that forward. So I think that's going to be important for him as time goes on.
And Smithy, you mentioned people as one of the, and I'm not just saying it because you're on the pod, one of the great opening batters of this era with that massive front pad whipping it through mid-wicket on a regular basis. I reckon we must have had I dread to think how many hours of meetings of how to get you out and how to stop you scoring. You've not only got rid of 3 England captains, but you've caused chaos in team meetings over many, many years. What do you make of the opening partnership for England in Zach Crawley and Alex Lees?
Having watched it live and watched a bit on TV, it doesn't bring confidence to me. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm not saying they're not good players. I mean, in particular, it's just focus on Zach Crawley. I mean, he doesn't look to be growing in his mental game. For me, I think when you start getting out the same way as he is, I mean, like Vaughany, if I took myself as an example, people ask you, okay, so you weren't the best looking batter in the world, but what were your strengths? So I understood my strengths and my weaknesses. That was something, if I faced Jimmy, I knew that I would bat on 2 leg. He was going to try, the biggest danger for me was LBW. So I had a mindset how I was going to take him on. Broad, maybe the extra bounce. I'd want to command off stump a lot more. And in my innings, I knew that cover driving for me, for example, was something I didn't really want to do early on in my innings. I would cut. I'd look to cut. I'd look to pull. If you were in my channel, I'd look to hit the ball back at you or leg side until I was in. So when I look at Crawley play, it doesn't look like he's got a mindset of understanding his own game. He just plays. And I think that's the danger when you say we want to be aggressive and we want to take the game on. You don't actually think about how, and I think that's important. Like, what's the how of how we're going to do that? And understanding your own strengths and weaknesses as a batter, in particular, top order batter, top 3 in the engine room, you have to. You're playing the new ball. Swinging around. You can't just go out there. Vaughany, as a top order batter, you already fail more than you succeed. 1 in 3, your best batters in the world performed 1 in 3. Am I right? If you look at the stats. Yeah. So dealing with failure is a huge part, and understanding your own strengths and weaknesses is key as well. And when I look at him, I don't think he gets that.
And Alex Lees, the left-hander, similar kind of build to yourself. He's trying to play this aggressive game.
I don't know why. If you're going to pick an Alex Lees, pick him to do his job. And South Africa have done that. Sorrel Avia probably would have caught a lot of people by surprise when he was selected in South Africa. He's just a solid, performer at domestic level here. Never sets the world alight, but you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to give you 100%. He's going to fight hard. He understands his game a little bit, and his performance in the national side he's done his job. He does his job more consistently, and him and Dean at the top of the order. They fight hard for every inch that they get, and setting up those platforms and those partnerships in your top 3 are key. So I think it's just, if you're picking Alex Lees based on the way that he plays, his record, let him play that way, because he'll do his job. He'll allow the Bairstows and the Stokes to eventually play their way because they're getting a better platform every game. And that's why when I look at that England lineup, obviously he's an incredible player, Joe Root. But I always like to attack the batsman that I thought had the brain, thought about things a bit more. Because the minute you knock that person over, it exposes the attacking player in the lineup that doesn't really like to think. So, if it was, his ego is already bruised at the moment. But KP, for example, if we could get Trotter out, that would hold the thing together, or Bell, that would allow him to play the way that he did, then he was exposed. Once we knocked them over, then he had to now say, okay, how do I play? What's the situation? And that's not something that, from the outside, that I wanted to expose him to that often.
South African cricket's been, a little bit in a turbulent place, but this side look like they're really on the up and up.
No, South African cricket's been in a turbulent place for a while now, Tuffers, but I think it's been a lot of hard work. I think Bouch has done a great job just keeping his head down and building that team. When I got involved as director of cricket, we kind of the first 6 months when COVID hit, we just said, let's throw the net as far and wide as we can. Let's try and identify talent. I think in that period, we kitted out 43 people and I think 32 ended up playing. But we just needed to identify talent that we could then take forward and work with. And I think he's done a great job in growing the squad to where it is now. And I think if you go look, everyone will rave because it's a big series. There's a lot of eyeballs now, this first test against England. But if you go and look over the last sort of year and a half in particular, the consistency's been there, maybe not in one-day cricket, but T20 and test cricket, their performances have been, really solid. Beating India, the number 1 team here in South Africa, was a huge thing for them. And then now, the confidence has just grown. The player group has just grown. So I think there's now a nice quality group of talented cricketers around. I always get a little bit nervous when I watch us bat. I think we can always develop that more, but nice batch of bowlers coming through, good spin options. And if the batting can just become more consistent, there's a good period ahead.
You talk about South African cricket having had a tricky patch. A lot of that's obviously down to finances. Part of it's COVID as well. You're involved in this new T20 league, and you've said recently that South Africa essentially had to produce its own league because it sort of risked losing players if it didn't. So, I mean, how to what extent was South Africa compelled by its finances to set up this league?
I think financially there was absolutely no doubt that it had to get something going. I mean, what you don't want is that effectively South Africa starts to rely on ICC grant payments and fades away from the world game. So I think that South Africa had to find a seat at the table in terms of developing its own product that it could own and develop and grow into the future. So now it can protect itself and invest in the grassroots much more now, bring the player group through. I think not only will this league, the type of owners we've got in this league, they'll bring a professionalism, a quality of personnel, experience, coaching, even medical, and an investment into grassroots that will benefit South African cricket from a player perspective into the future. I think also, South Africa as a country is not sitting in a similar position to England, Australia, India effectively. Free agency is a huge issue for us. I mean, if I was just looking the other day, I shuddered to think how many players we would have lost to the UAE league if we didn't develop, our own league. We would have lost definitely our top players, maybe even a number of domestic players. So, for that now we keep our local talent in our game. There's an opportunity for them financially and, a huge platform as well. So I think from that perspective, it was important. So yeah, we're excited to have it up and going. It's a lot of work at the moment. We launch in Jan, and yeah, hopefully.
And with these franchises popping up all over the place, how do you ensure that your league stands out and, most importantly, I guess, attracts the best players?
Well, I think fortunately in South Africa, like England, there's a bit of a cricket culture. We've got a fan base. We've got stadiums. Already you can feel the interest in something like this. We're very fortunate with the 6 partners that we've attracted, that they're very credible and strong brands within the cricket landscape and certainly on the franchise. So they also have the ability to sustain, the longevity of the league and build with us. And that was something that was important. But always comes down to the quality of cricket. Yes, you can have all the entertainment in the world, but it will always come down to the quality of the cricket. We're fortunate that the South African player base will take up a huge, amount of that, and we'll invest in those players. But also the quality of internationals. We're fortunate to have a number of Englishmen, for example. Some of the top talent there and around the world, which just adds to the flavour of the contest.
Smithy, just I notice your role is the commissioner. what does the commissioner do?
So no, it's falling out of the Lalit days. Basically, I'm effectively, Vaughany, something you'll understand is I'm probably CEO, but the shareholders thought the commissioner sounded more fancy for someone like me.
Lots of Ferreira.
There's a bat signal on your roof.
And as the commissioner, just tell us which of the players were the hardest to get over to play in your league.
Well, let me tell you, that was a flippin' nightmare. Because at the time we were busy running the process with an audit firm here to close down the bid process of the 6 teams. And, unfortunately, Cricket South Africa has trialled this, I don't know, at least twice, and it's failed. So the legacy issues of that, up against some of the other nations who are offering big money, new leagues offering big money, players are in a position where they had the options to choose, So trying to overcome those legacy issues was difficult. To get players to believe that this would be a success was difficult. But fortunately, in that period, we had a number of players, and once we started to get some big names on board, it really made life easier. So in all, it was a nightmare. Closing some big players was key to, it's like a herd mentality as well. Once you get 1 or 2 in and they believe in it, it does start to go from there. But listen, if I never have to deal with a player agent again, I'll be a happy man.
Obviously, that's T20. I mean, talking about the future of Test cricket, the next 4-year block of fixtures has just been unveiled by the ICC. South Africa is due to play 28 tests, and 22 of those are going to be in 11 two-match series. England, by contrast, are playing 43. I mean, obviously, I would assume that Test cricket is your first love. How disappointing is it to you that South Africa is playing that few tests over the next 4 years?
Yeah, look, I need to understand that I personally played no role in that FTP, so I need to speak to the CEO there and figure out what was the focus points in terms of putting that FTP together. I mean, our league is 4 weeks of an entire year, so it can't be, the entire reason. So we need to see. I need to figure out, what were his pressure points and why that was the case. Obviously, we would love to see more Test cricket, especially with I think now you can feel the emotions. Suddenly everyone's on board with our team doing well, and close to qualifying for the World Test Championship final, and it's a great story from where they've come from. So, hopefully the one or two of those things can be fixed. I just think in general the bilateral series there needs to be some adults in the room and try and figure out how to take that forward. I think. And just on, I mean, Vaughany, even in our playing days, England always played more tests in South Africa. I mean, in an England cycle, we would play 15 tests maybe, in a period. But it is obviously a lot less now than it has been in the past. But I think in general, bilateral cricket needs an important discussion. There's too many of these makeup series now that get thrown in, that have no context. Even the ICC in itself is becoming a more events-based operation with a world event every year. So you can see where the focus is starting to shift. So I think there does need to be a conversation in terms of how it goes forward.
Yeah, do you think Test cricket's under threat, Graeme?
I don't think it's under threat, Tuffers, between top competitive nations. I think you're never going to, I can't, and I mean with this all respect, I mean, how many people are going to want to go and sit in a stadium and watch, I don't know, two of the associate nations play a test match? But these big contests that we saw at Lords the other day, or the Ashes, or India firing up against Australia, I think that people always have interest in that part of the game. But the ability to grow Test cricket outside those core nations, I think, is a huge problem.
I know you said the other day on television you think it'll go down to a six-nation competition Test match cricket. So when do you think that'll happen, and how do you see that'll kind of look in terms? Will there just be one league?
Well, Vaughany, I mean, I think it's inevitable. I don't know when. You never know when these things are going to happen. But I mean, it does seem like there's a bit of a momentum in world cricket pushing a certain direction. And that's why there needs to be some really solid conversations that happen in terms of navigating these spaces. But I can't see how Test cricket in itself now grows outside those top 5 or 6 nations. It's just, just in theory. Even here in South Africa, if we're hosting in England, it's very different to us hosting a Holland or, even with respect to a Bangladesh or a Zimbabwe. It's just the way the public views it. It's just, okay, England, Australia, India, even Pakistan, they're here. Now it's going to be a great summer, and that's the problem that the world of cricket has. And now what's happening is the T20 franchises are getting stronger. There's more investment in the game at that level. And it's going to be interesting to see guys like a Dewald Brevis or maybe a Will Jacks, or I don't know. Brevis is now with MI in two campaigns. Does he look to sign in 4? Would that become his primary contract? I don't know. These are the things that are going to be interesting to see over the next period of time.
Smithy, I mean, Ravi Shastri spoke on the podcast about the 50-over format. It's pretty much dying, isn't it? There's not enough in the 12 months of the calendar to have franchise leagues, ICC events, Test cricket, and 50-over cricket. One format has to go, doesn't it?
It does, Vaughany, but I guess the conversation that needs to be had is, one-day cricket is now in focus. I always thought that when T20 was going from strength to strength, I always thought that one-day cricket would, even when I was playing, I thought it would get less and less, but it never did for a long period of time. It still stayed pretty strong. It is obviously the main World Cup format. But, I mean, does T20 need to be an international format? That's also a question for me. Should it be a domestic-based format and maybe you can play a World Cup kind of like a football model, and then you can focus on tests and ODIs and I don't know. These are the debates that need to be thrown around the table. With franchise cricket getting strong, should international cricket play T20 outside a world event? Those, I guess, and then one-day cricket, what's the context of it? Building to a World Cup. If you look at broadcast rights now, I think there's much more offered for T20s than there is for any other format. So, nations that are struggling financially will start focusing on making decisions based on finance rather than, I guess, the core product of the game. So these are all things that need to be, solved. And everyone's got different challenges. The ECB, Australia, India, they'll have different problems to New Zealand, South Africa, and the likes. West Indies.
Graeme, you don't realize on this podcast, Phil will give you very simple, Graeme. It's either or. Phil will give you two options, and you must choose one.
These are always my worst, but Phil, coming from you, I can only imagine what's coming my way now.
No, they're all good, mate. They're all good. Here we go. First one, quite simply, beating England or beating Oz. Which would you fancy?
Listen, I'm going to say Oz.
Oh.
Is that because beating England was too easy?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough one to answer, but I just think it's like after fielding 6 hours a day in Australia and then winning, it's a wonderful feeling.
Right, second one. 277 at Edgbaston or your 259 at Lords?
I'd probably go to the Lords, 259, because Nas dropped me on 9 as well.
What? That was a goober, wasn't it? Cover point.
Broke his finger.
Just a little lollipop.
He broke his finger doing that as well.
And that was back-to-back double centuries. I think only 4 people have ever done that in Test history.
Yeah, I mean, it was Vaughany's first Test as well, which added to the feeling, and it was. Look, I think doing it at Lords, even coming back there now and reliving the experience, seeing your banner up there, just experiencing Lords in itself for a Test match is something incredible. So yeah, I mean, I guess the whole thing around that just made that amazing. Also going past Don Bradman, which I wasn't even aware of, but those are things you look back on. Special moments in your career.
Yeah, not half, mate, not half. And then we've got a nice glass of South African red or a nice pint of South African beer.
Red wine for me.
Red wine all day long. And then the final one here, mate, quite a straightforward one, and I'm sure you know this one. Seeing off NASA or seeing off Vaughany?
Listen, I have to say NASA. Vaughany and I still enjoy a pint and a few laughs. So.
Well, Graeme, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it. It's good to catch up.
Great chatting to Graeme Smith there. Great for talking about his career. Obviously, Mike, someone you played against regularly, he must have sort of loomed large in your thinking during your career. What was it like to come up against him?
Oh, he was, as I said in the interview about the amount of minutes we spent working out how to bowl to him. Do we go wide of off stump? He didn't hit it through the offside. And then eventually we realised that we needed to bowl straight to him and pack the leg side and almost accept that he would hit it nicely to the leg side and hope that he missed one. And we'd get him out LBW or he'd clip one to short mid-wicket. He was an incredible leader. He had great presence. He was very powerful, never took a step back. Whether it was to Nasser, to me, to Andrew Strauss, he never took a step back. But when we first started, and I got him when he was a young captain, he was very verbal, he was very aggressive, probably said a few things that he regretted. And the more I played against him, the more actually we started to become quite good pals. So from 2002-03 to 2004, 05 in South Africa, where we managed to get a victory, which gave us momentum leading into 05, to then the series that I resigned from in 2008. We became really good pals about, the game, knowing that being a captain of a country is a huge position. But I always say to captain England's pressurised, but to captain South Africa, with all the politics that goes on in South African sport, it's remarkable. And to think that he did it 108 test matches, starting at 22, and to do that batting, opening the batting, not hiding in the middle, going out facing the first ball and averaging pretty much 50. A remarkable kind of person and a great guy. As you've really got the feeling on the pod, he's got a great character, great lots of humour.
Yeah.
He likes to have a load of fun. I think in his time he's been a bit of a cheeky chappy. And now he's the commissioner. He's finishing his life as a commissioner of the new T20 league in South Africa. No, he's a great guy. Great to have him on the pod.
Yeah. I mean, the innings for me that stands out in the 2008-2009 series against Australia, final test, he broke his hand in the first innings, and he comes out in the second innings, Australia 9 wickets down, bats at 11 against Mitchell Johnson, and he has to last something like 30 balls, I think, and he got to 17, and there were sort of 5 minutes to go, and he would have saved the game. So he didn't quite save the game. But the point was, South Africa had already won the series, but nevertheless, he's doing everything he can to try and make sure that he saves that game.
Yeah, I mean, he's a tough cookie.
Yeah.
He's the typical leader that led from the front. He wouldn't have asked any of his players to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. I think over the years he got tactically very, very good at captaincy. I think when he first started, like everyone who starts out in captaincy, you're a little bit naive and you're not quite sure how to play certain situations. He alludes to that with Ben Stokes, and over the years that you do it, you get a little bit wiser, a little bit more kind of in with what needs to happen at certain times in the test match. And also how to play the mental card on certain players. And I love the fact he used to target the engine, the player. So he would target, as it looked like South Africa had targeted Joe Root at Lords, got him out cheaply twice, won the test match. And again, that's a very typical South African way of going about it. Not being too worried about the flamboyant players, but if you can get rid of the glue, the real rock, that's going to go a long way to giving your side a lot of success. Yeah, great to have him on.
Talked about the 100 last week, said it hadn't really got going. Phil, you were down at Cardiff last night, weren't you?
Bit of a nasty one down at Cardiff. The Welsh Fire, men and ladies, haven't won a game, I don't think. Yeah. It's been a bit tricky for them.
Yeah.
And see it now. It's tough. I was down there. They were 3 down for 1 run within a blink of an eye. Managed to get themselves to a bit of a score, which was 120 odd, and then Sterling and de Kock just came out and blasted it off. So another disappointing 100 for the Welsh Fire. There's lots of work to do down there.
It wasn't a great match all in all. I was watching on TV. The women's game was good. Sophia Dunkley, friend of the pod, played very nicely in the women's match. Got 49 off 43 in the drizzle. But the men's match, it was kind of over in the first spell. George Garton got those, as you say, 3 wickets and 7 balls, and that effectively was that.
Yeah, someone came up to me at Lords, actually. I'm enjoying the 100. I'm looking forward to it now, and it's starting to sort of like build to a sort of crescendo now that the eliminators are away. And it's just as well the Southern Brave did win that. Now they have got a chance if they win every single game and qualify. But someone came up to me and said, "I've never seen a game with so much action and so little drama." I sort of went, well, yeah. I mean, because there were sixes and wickets going everywhere, but it just didn't it didn't ignite, as you say. It was done in the first 3 balls.
And Mike, I'm trying to remember, was Southern Brave your tip to win it?
It probably was, because they won it last year. I think I might have mentioned Manchester Originals as well. There's a bit of an outsider there coming up the rails. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty stage, isn't it? That you have to win in, get to those qualifications, get to the final. Look, if you're there and you're buzzing in the ground and there's great crowds, it's fantastic. I just don't know why it's not seemed to have got traction this year. There doesn't seem to be as much on social media. There doesn't seem to be as much in terms of column inches, in the papers. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's been missing, but it certainly doesn't.
We know what's been missing. Sweet Caroline.
They are stubborn and they won't do it. They decided they're not going to do it and they won't do it. It's pathetic. Get it back.
Right, that's about all we have time for today. Thanks to Mike and Phil as always. A special thanks to Graeme Smith for his time too. We wish him luck in his role as Commissioner of South Africa's new T20 League. 3 of us are back next Wednesday. Hopefully we'll be discussing a more positive result for England in the second test with South Africa. In the meantime, you can check out last week's episode with Sir Geoffrey Boycott. It was a cracker. That's on the Vaughany Tuffers Cricket Club channel. He had plenty to say on the current England setup from top to bottom, as well as some fascinating stories from his own career. A reminder, you can get in touch with us on Twitter or by email. The address is cricketclub@telegraph.co.uk. Thank you for listening to this episode and make sure to subscribe to stay up to date. Until next week, goodbye.